At one point, this punk rocker was on top of the world. He was selling out arenas, selling gold records, and even touring with big names like Blink-182. But then this artist's journey took an unexpected turn. He was found guilty and sentenced to 7 years in prison for scamming a massive $27 million from people. His bandmates initially severed ties with him, but shockingly, they let him back in the band after he claimed a medical condition and got out of prison early. Rumor has it that they only accepted him back because he used his stolen money to fund the band's future recordings and tours. Mike Davenport is the bass player for the pop-punk band the Ataris, originally started in 1996 with only 2 members, singer-songwriter and guitarist Christopher Rowe and guitar player Jason Thomason. Chris wrote and recorded some demos on a 4-track using a drum machine while they searched for a drummer, but one day they got an insanely crazy big break. While watching another band at a concert, Rowe gave one of his roadies his demo tape, who then gave it to Joe Escalante, the bass player for the band, the Vandals. Escalante loved it so much that a few weeks later he called up Rowe and told him that he wanted to sign the Ataris to his label Kung Fu Records. It's actually kind of funny because Rowe originally was just looking for a drummer and he wound up getting a record deal and didn't even have a drummer yet. Once signed, they found a drummer and released their debut album Anywhere But Here, which they tracked the whole thing in less than a week. Rowe says he has OCD and wants to control every single aspect of the band, so he recorded every single instrument other than the drums. His wanting complete control over everything that happens in the band would become a problem that would plague the band throughout their entire career. One time during a show, Rowe got mad that his drummer is drumming off time, so during a song, he threw his guitar at the drum set, then picked up the drum sets and threw them at the drummer. Then he stopped the entire show and said he was going to finish the rest of the songs by himself.
My drummer's fucking failing tonight. I don't know what his fucking problem is, but I'm gonna finish the set by myself. I'll play a few songs, whatever you want to hear, but I can't fucking do this. Sorry. We all have bad shows, but it's fucking embarrassing. I can't handle it.
After their first record, Rowe moved from Indiana to Santa Barbara, California. He gained all new members, but over time, one by one kept leaving. Rowe was ready to give up as he was just living in his van and completely broke, so he decided to move back home. But he had a tour booked with the band Unwritten Law, so he decided to give the band one last shot. It was during this time that Mike Davenport joined the band as the bassist. They found the rest of the members and played that tour, which was successful enough for them to continue on, and they recorded their next album, Blue Skies, Broken Hearts, Next 12 Exits. That album had more widespread acclaim. They even toured with Blink-182 to support this album. They had another album, End Is Forever, which was well received and was the first album to chart. But it wasn't until their massively successful album So Long Astoria which pushed them into the mainstream. They signed to a major label, Columbia Records, and their album charted at number 24 on the top 200 Billboard charts. Their album went on to sell 700,000 copies and was certified gold, mostly due to their hugely successful single, a pop-punk cover of Don Henley's The Boys of Summer. Throughout all this, the band kept on changing members, like nearly every 6 months it seemed like. Just look at this list of all the past members. It's quite a lot compared to other bands. I'm pretty sure a lot of them couldn't get along with Rowe wanting complete control over every aspect. This is about the time when Mike Davenport left the band for creative differences and began his scam that would wind up sending him to prison for 7 years. Davenport wanted the band to go in a harder direction and didn't like the more pop direction they were heading. Plus, they got dropped from their major label, Columbia Records. There was a seat change at the top of Columbia Records, and they didn't see a future for pop-punk bands. So in 2005, once out of the band, Davenport started up a new band called Versus the World, with employees from the Ataris record store down on Haley. They released an album and began touring. He talked to Columbia Records about them releasing his new band's album, but they declined, so he released it on Kung Fu Records. After their first release and touring for that album, Davenport decided to focus more on his family. He couldn't tour as much and needed more consistent work, so in 2006, he started his real estate scam. His scam went on for 10 years, from 2006 to 2016, and he wound up getting $27 million from over 130,000 victims. 104 of the victims were located in the same town that the Ataris started. So how the scam worked was Davenport had multiple call centers where him and his employees would post ads on Craigslist and similar websites. The ads would show certain houses for sale or rent at favorable prices, when in fact the houses described in the ads didn't even exist. The people who responded to his ads were told that they had to purchase his list of houses before they could see any additional information. The list cost the buyers $199, but on the list were houses that were in pre-foreclosure, meaning that the original owners of the home couldn't make their monthly mortgage payments and the bank was about to take their home away from them. So all the buyers needed to do was take over the monthly mortgage payments from the original owner and they could own the home. And that the deeds to the homes would be transferred into the new buyer's name. The $199 fee that Davenport charged to access the list was supposed to cover the cost of title searches and deed transfers. No matter what area of the country the customer lived in, the salesperson told them that the list contained numerous pre-foreclosure properties available in their area. After the consumer paid the $199 fee, they would find out the houses listed were either not really for sale or straight up didn't exist. If the customer asked for more information about a specific house advertised on Craigslist, the company's customer service department always told them that the house was no longer available. If someone requested a refund, the victims were informed by Davenport's team that they would need to endure a 90-day waiting period and submit a refund request accompanied by 5 copies of letters from property owners as evidence that the homes they visited were indeed inaccurately listed. Even when people managed to do all that, they still never got a refund. When the customers would call and talk with Davenport's customer service, they would just give them the runaround and then place them on hold for endless hours. Sometimes they would request to talk to a manager who would just transfer them from one manager to the next manager, and eventually the customer would just give up because it was so tedious. With it only being $199, most people just gave up and didn't want to deal with the hassle and all the time it would take just to get your money back. All this time though, the feds had actually been investigating Davenport and even raided one of his call centers back in October of 2016. With the heat from the feds increasing, Davenport decided to close down all of his operations, even closing down all of his websites. But that didn't matter because in December of 2017, the feds finally arrested him while he was at the Arkansas airport. He had $104,000 in cash on him, which they seized, along with another $850,000 in his personal bank accounts. After being charged with multiple crimes in 2017, he finally took a plea deal and pled guilty in 2018 to just one account of conspiracy to commit mail and wire fraud. Although he was only arrested for one of his call center companies called American Standard, he in fact had many business names. As one business would start getting bad reviews and negative press online, he would change the business name to something else. He had changed the name of his businesses over 24 times. The Better Business Bureau would receive thousands of complaints from some of his businesses, where he would close that name down and start with a new name to fool customers. In 2019, he was finally sentenced to 7 years in prison, along with 5 of his managers, who each received either 5 years of parole or some time in prison. When the judge sentenced him, she told him, "You were intoxicated with making all this money. You did horrible things." When the Ataris found out all about this, Chris Rowe posted a statement on the band's Facebook stating, "I've seen the news about our former bass player, Mike Davenport. Davenport has not been associated with the Ataris since 2005, other than a few one-off live performances. He is no longer in our band. I no longer speak to him and haven't had any communication with him for a very long time. His actions represent him and him alone. I am greatly saddened and shocked to read the news about his unfortunate actions, and my heart goes out to those affected by the choices he made." Even though he was sentenced to 7 years in federal prison, he was released just 2 years later, with him posting a picture on his Instagram April of 2021 saying he was out. Apparently he said he had a medical condition, and since it was during the pandemic, they released him early. He got out of prison using the pandemic laws and stated he has a medical condition. "I knew the family, and the financial crimes were not the worst thing he was doing." He dried up his mother-in-law's bank account before going to prison, leaving an 80-year-old woman with no money and bad checks. So you might be wondering, if he stole $27 million and the feds only really took about $1 million of it, where did the rest of the money go? Well, it seemed like he hid a bunch of the money and was using the money to fund his previous bands. Plus, running that big of an operation with many call centers does take a lot of money to run. Plus, the reason why some of his managers got arrested too was they probably took some of the profits as well. Also, it looked like after being released from prison, he was using the stolen money to fund the Ataris' latest tour, as highlighted in this person's post. He profited more, but he spent it all on paying for his band's tours. The last Ataris tour he was on, he paid 100% of. Even though the band Ataris said they didn't really want to talk to him anymore and condemned his actions, apparently soon after being released, he was back in the band, with him posting pictures of them back together for a new tour. So it seems like they patched up their differences pretty quickly, especially since he was helping fund the band's tours. After getting dropped from their major label, Columbia Records, the Ataris only released 2 albums after So Long a Story that didn't do too well, with their last full-length album being released in 2017. Since then, they haven't released anything other than a couple live albums and an acoustic album of their previously recorded songs. They still play shows here and there, mostly just riding off their hit 2003 album So Long a Story. It was kind of weird when I was researching the story because I knew a guy who did almost the exact same thing during this time. He had a call center, but instead of selling a list, he would go to real estate agents and say for $500, he would send them leads of potential buyers that wanted to buy homes. These real estate agents would pay $500, and then he would just send them either nothing at all or just random leads that weren't real leads at all. So of course they would complain, and he would change the business name after he got a ton of negative reviews on like Facebook, the Better Business Bureau, things like that, and he was constantly changing names. I remember him changing business names like every other month because they would get so many negative reviews online. And he had a massive building with hundreds of employees, and I remember him posting ads to our friends, always looking for new hires, paying a minimum wage plus commission. Eventually it all caught up with him, and he didn't get nearly $27 million. I don't know what he got in the end, but he ended up disappearing. So I haven't heard from him for a pretty long time. As for Mike Davenport, nothing that terrible happened to him. Even though he scammed $27 million from people, he only ended up serving 2 years in prison. He's back with the band that made him famous, and now he's living off all that stolen money.
Step by step, and I feel boom boom, and I see you come from across the room. I know you're trouble in my